Ashwood was the kind of town people forgot about. A sleepy place nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, where everyone knew each other's names and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. Life moved slowly here, marked by the changing seasons and the steady rhythm of small-town routines. But beneath the calm surface, something ancient and restless stirred. It began with the earth itself. One morning, a deep, jagged sinkhole appeared overnight in the middle of Main Street, swallowing a parked car and part of the sidewalk. The townsfolk gathered, whispering theories and fears, but no one could explain why the ground was breaking apart. Then more holes appeared, near the school, behind the church, even in the quiet woods at the town's edge. Each one revealed dark, hollow tunnels carved deep beneath the earth, tunnels that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. Curiosity turned to dread as strange noises echoed from the depths, whispers, scratching, and sometimes a low, mournful wail that chilled the blood. When a group of locals, drawn by fear and fascination, decide to explore the tunnels, they uncover a hidden world beneath Ashwood, a place where shadows move and the past refuses to stay buried. What lies beneath the hollowed ground is more than just forgotten history. It is a darkness that feeds on fear, a secret that threatens to consume the town itself. The morning sun had barely risen over Ashwood when the first sinkhole appeared. It was a jagged, gaping wound in the earth, right in the middle of Main Street, swallowing a rusty old pickup truck and part of the cracked asphalt. The town's residents gathered quickly, their faces pale with shock and confusion. Sheriff Tom Harris was the first official on the scene. A tall man with graying hair and a steady gaze, he had seen his share of small-town troubles, but nothing like this. What in God's name happened here? He muttered, kneeling at the edge of the hole and shining his flashlight into the darkness below. The hole was deep, far deeper than anyone expected. The walls were lined with roots and jagged rocks, and at the bottom, a narrow tunnel disappeared into the blackness. "Looks like some kind of cave," Tom said, standing up. "But this wasn't here yesterday." Maggie Collins, the town's local reporter, pushed through the crowd, her notebook in hand. "Sheriff, do you think it's safe? Could this be the start of more sinkholes?" Tom shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to find out what's going on before someone gets hurt." As the day wore on, more sinkholes appeared. One behind the old church, another near the elementary school playground. Panic began to ripple through Ashwood. Parents kept their children close, and the town council called an emergency meeting. Among the worried townsfolk was a small group of friends who had grown up together. Maggie, Tom's deputy Lucas, a local historian named Evelyn, and a curious teenager named Jamie. They met at the diner that evening, the air thick with tension. "We can't just wait for the ground to swallow the whole town," Maggie said, her eyes sharp. "We need to find out what's beneath those tunnels." Evelyn nodded, pushing her glasses up her nose. "There are old legends about this area, stories of underground passages used by settlers, and even older tales of something darker, buried beneath the earth." Lucas frowned. "You mean like ghosts?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not ghosts. Something else. Something that's been here long before Ashwood was founded." Jamie, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I want to go down there, see what's really down in those tunnels." The others exchanged uneasy glances. The idea was dangerous, but the mystery was too compelling to ignore. "We'll need gear," Lucas said. "Flashlights, ropes, maybe some climbing equipment." Maggie smiled grimly. Then it settled. "Tomorrow night, we explore." As darkness fell over Ashwood, the town held its breath. Beneath the hollowed ground, something waited, watching, listening, and ready to be discovered. The sun had long set when Maggie, Lucas, Evelyn, and Jamie gathered at the edge of the largest sinkhole, the one that had opened behind the old church. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and decay. Their flashlights cut through the thick darkness, revealing jagged roots and crumbling stone walls. Jamie tightened the straps on his backpack, which held ropes, extra batteries, and a small first aid kit. "Ready?" he asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. Maggie nodded, her reporter's curiosity pushing aside the gnawing fear in her stomach. "Let's find out what's down there." Lucas secured a rope around a sturdy tree and began lowering himself into the tunnel first, his flashlight bobbing as he descended. Evelyn followed, her face pale but determined. Maggie and Jamie climbed down carefully after them, the cold air growing heavier with every step. The tunnel was narrow and winding, the walls slick with moisture. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, mingling with the distant faint whisper of something else. A low, almost imperceptible hum that sent chills down their spines. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. The ceiling arched high above, dripping with stalactites, and the floor was uneven, littered with rocks and broken roots. Strange symbols were etched into the stone walls, spirals, lines, and shapes that seemed to pulse faintly in the flashlight beams. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "These markings, they're ancient, possibly pre-colonial." Jamie crouched to examine the ground, noticing a series of shallow depressions arranged in a circle. "Looks like some kind of ritual site." Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the cavern, carrying with it a faint, mournful wail. The friends froze, their breath visible in the chill air. "Did you hear that?" Maggie asked, her voice trembling. Lucas shone his light toward the far end of the cavern, where a narrow passage disappeared into darkness. "We should check it out." They moved cautiously, the sense of being watched growing stronger with every step. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with an unseen weight. At the end of the passage, they found a small chamber. In its center lay a stone altar, cracked and covered in moss. On the altar rested a weathered wooden box, bound with iron bands and locked tight. Evelyn reached out, hesitating. This must be what's been disturbing the ground above. Something buried here, something powerful. Jamie glanced nervously at the box. "Should we open it?" Before anyone could answer, a sudden rumble shook the cavern. Dust and small stones rained down from the ceiling, and the tunnel behind them began to collapse. "Move!" Lucas shouted, grabbing Maggie's arm. They sprinted back toward the tunnel entrance, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Just as they reached the rope ladder, a large chunk of rock crashed down, blocking the way behind them. Breathing hard, they climbed out of the sinkhole and into the cool night air, the cavern sealing itself once more beneath the earth. The box remained locked in the darkness below, its secrets still hidden. But the warning was clear. Whatever lay beneath Ashwood was waking. Back in the safety of Maggie's cluttered living room, the group sat in tense silence. The flickering light of a single lamp cast long shadows on the walls, mirroring the unease that settled over them. "We barely made it out," Lucas said, rubbing his sore shoulder. "That collapse could have killed us." Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the journal she had pulled from her bag, an old leather-bound book she'd found in the town archives earlier that day. "There are references here to a hollowed ground beneath Ashwood, a place where the earth is said to be cursed." Maggie leaned forward, eager despite the fear. "What kind of curse?" Evelyn flipped through the fragile pages. According to legend, the land was once home to a tribe that vanished mysteriously. Some say they were trapped underground by a dark force, something that feeds on the living. Jamie shivered. "That explains the wails we heard." Lucas frowned. "So what's in that box? And why is it locked?" Evelyn's voice dropped. "The box is said to contain a relic, an object of great power, bound to the curse. If disturbed, it could unleash whatever darkness lies beneath." Maggie's reporter instincts kicked in. "We need to find a way back down there. If the ground is still unstable, the town's in danger." "But we can't just rush in blindly," Evelyn warned. "We need to understand what we're dealing with first." The group agreed to research the symbols they'd seen in the cavern. Evelyn spent the next day poring over ancient texts and tribal records, searching for clues. That evening, she called the others with a breakthrough. "The symbols are part of a protective ritual," she explained. "They were meant to seal something away, a guardian or a monster, perhaps." Maggie's eyes widened. "So the curse isn't just a story. It's real. And it's still active," Evelyn said grimly. "If the seal weakens, whatever's trapped could break free." Jamie clenched his fists. "Then we have to stop it." Lucas nodded. "We'll need better equipment and maybe some help." Maggie smiled faintly. "I know someone who might be able to help. A professor who specializes in folklore and ancient curses. If anyone can guide us, it's him." The group prepared for their next move, knowing the danger was far from over. Beneath the hollowed ground, something ancient and hungry waited, and time was running out. The next morning, Maggie, Lucas, Evelyn, and Jamie drove to the nearby university, a sprawling campus filled with old stone buildings and towering oaks. They had arranged to meet Professor Harold Crane, a renowned expert in folklore and ancient rituals, hoping he could shed light on the curse beneath Ashwood. Professor Crane was a tall, thin man with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the room. His office was cluttered with books, artifacts, and strange trinkets collected from his travels. After hearing their story, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "The hollowed ground beneath Ashwood is no ordinary geological phenomenon," he said gravely. "It is a place where the veil between worlds is thin, where ancient forces were sealed away long ago." Evelyn showed him the journal and the photos of the symbols. "We found these markings in a cavern beneath the sinkholes. They seem to be part of a protective ritual." The professor nodded. "Indeed, these symbols are part of a binding spell designed to imprison a malevolent entity. Disturbing the seal risks unleashing it." Jamie swallowed hard. "What kind of entity?" Crane's eyes darkened. "Legends speak of a creature known as the Wendigo, a spirit of hunger and madness bound beneath the earth by the tribe that once lived there. It feeds on fear and despair, growing stronger when the living forget its existence. Maggie shivered. So the sinkholes, the whales, it's the Wendigo trying to break free? Exactly, Crane said. And if it escapes, it will bring ruin to Ashwood. Lucas clenched his fists. What can we do to stop it? The professor stood and walked to a large, ancient map pinned to the wall. There is a ritual, a reversal of the binding spell. It requires a circle of salt, candles made from sacred herbs, and the recitation of the tribe's ancient words. But it must be performed at the heart of the hallowed ground at midnight. Evelyn frowned. Do we know the words? Crane shook his head. They were lost to time, but fragments remain in the tribe's oral history. I can help you reconstruct them, but it will take time. Maggie looked at her friends, determination shining in her eyes. We don't have much time. The ground is still unstable, and the creature is growing stronger. Crane nodded solemnly. Then we must act quickly. I will gather what knowledge I can. You must prepare yourselves. This will be dangerous. As they left the university, the weight of the task ahead settled heavily on them. Beneath the hollowed ground, the Wendigo stirred, its hunger growing with every passing moment. And the clock was ticking. Back in Ashwood, the group gathered at Maggie's house, the walls lined with maps, books, and hastily scribbled notes. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on them all, but there was no turning back now. We need to collect the materials for the ritual, Evelyn said, spreading out a list. Salt, candles made from sage and cedar, and the herbs used by the tribe, mugwort and sweetgrass. Jamie frowned. Where do we find those? The forest? Evelyn nodded. Yes, but we must be careful. The forest is old and sacred. We don't want to anger whatever still watches over it. Lucas checked his gear. Ropes, flashlights, first aid kits. We'll also need to be ready for anything down there. The tunnels are unstable, and the Wendigo won't be happy we're coming. Maggie looked at the clock. Midnight is less than 24 hours away. We don't have much time. The group split up to gather supplies. Maggie visited the local herbalist, an elderly woman named Ruth, who handed her bundles of dried sage and sweetgrass with a knowing look. Be careful, child, Ruth warned. The earth remembers. It doesn't forgive easily. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Jamie ventured into the forest, carefully collecting the herbs while keeping an eye on the shadows between the trees. The forest seemed alive, watching their every move. Lucas checked in with Sheriff Harris, who agreed to keep watch over the town during the ritual, ready to call for help if needed. As night fell, the friends reconvened at the clearing near the largest sinkhole. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Lena, a local who had joined their group after hearing about the sinkholes, arrived with a circle of salt and the candles. She had grown up hearing the old legends and was determined to help. Together, they began preparing the ritual site. Lena carefully sprinkled the salt in a wide circle around the stone monument, while Maggie lit the candles, their flames flickering in the cool night air. Evelyn held the journal open, reciting the reconstructed words of the tribe's ancient chant. The others joined in hesitantly, their voices trembling but growing stronger with each repetition. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse, the air vibrating with unseen energy. Shadows lengthened and twisted, and a cold wind swept through the clearing. Suddenly, A low growl echoed from the depths of the sinkhole. The Wendigo was awake. The friends tightened their circle, holding hands and focusing on the chant. The creature's presence grew stronger, a dark force pressing against the salt barrier. Jamie's flashlight flickered, and a shadow darted just beyond the circle's edge. "Don't break the circle!" Evelyn shouted. The growl turned into a roar, shaking the trees and rattling the earth. The Wendigo was trying to break free. But the friends held firm, their voices rising in unison, the ancient words weaving a protective spell. Slowly, the darkness began to recede, the growls fading into distant echoes. When the last word was spoken, silence fell over the clearing. The Wendigo was sealed once more. Exhausted but victorious, the friends collapsed to the ground, the first light of dawn breaking over Ashwood. The hollowed ground was quiet again. For now, the first rays of dawn filtered through the trees, casting a soft golden light over the clearing. The air was still, the oppressive weight that had hung over Ashwood lifted, at least for now. Maggie, Lucas, Evelyn, Jamie, and Lena sat in a circle, exhausted but relieved. The ritual had worked. The Wendigo was sealed beneath the earth once more, its hunger quelled by the ancient words in the protective circle. "We did it," Maggie whispered, her voice hoarse. Lucas nodded, though his eyes remained watchful. "For now, but we can't let our guard down." Evelyn closed the journal gently. "The tribe's magic is strong, but it needs to be maintained. The seal can weaken over time if forgotten." Jamie looked toward the forest, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. "What if it comes back? What if the ground opens again?" Lena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll be ready. We know what's beneath the hollowed ground now." Back in town, life slowly returned to normal. The sinkholes were filled, the earth stabilized, and the townsfolk began to breathe easier. But the memory of the darkness beneath their feet lingered. Maggie wrote a series of articles, carefully balancing truth and caution, warning the town without inciting panic. The story of the hollowed ground became a whispered legend once more, a secret shared by those who had faced the darkness and lived. One evening, as the friends gathered at the diner, a strange feeling settled over them, a sense that the earth was watching, waiting. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. "Remember." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. The hollowed ground was quiet, but the story was far from over.